Welcome to tonight's sleep story. Let's drift into a soothing story together as you begin your journey into a restful and rejuvenating sleep. The gates of the mansion creaked as Eliza stepped inside, the rusted iron groaning in protest. It was a grand, imposing structure, its towering walls looming like ancient sentinels, guarding secrets that Eliza could not yet understand. The cold wind tugged at her sleeves, and the air smelled faintly of damp earth and the distant scent of wet leaves. She had never seen anything like it, so remote, so untouched by the warmth of life. Her heart clenched as she stood at the threshold, her small suitcase clutched tightly in her hand, dot at the mere thought of being abandoned here, far away from the only home she had ever known. Her chest tightened. Her parents, now both gone, had never prepared her for this. She was alone in this vast mansion, with only the cold silence of the stone walls to keep her company. Elisa had always been a quiet girl, but now, in the face of such isolation, she felt her silence become a heavy burden. The house felt empty, almost suffocating. The echo of her footsteps on the marble floor seemed unnaturally loud in the stillness. She could hear the wind howling outside, but inside, there was nothing but the sound of her breathing. Elisa's mind raced as she took a few tentative steps forward, unsure of where to go. The walls seemed to press in on her, and she could feel her heart beat faster with each step. She was greeted by a servant, a woman whose face was as stern and lifeless as the walls themselves. She barely spoke, only showing Eliza to her room in a silent procession. The room was large, but cold and sparse, with only the barest of furnishings, a simple bed, a chest, a worn-out carpet. The only thing that stood out was the view from the window, where Eliza could see the dark expanse of the garden below. The branches of the trees swayed in the wind, casting long, twisted shadows on the ground, as if reaching for something Eliza could not understand. The air in her room felt heavy, weighed down by memories she had no part in. The walls were old, the wooden floors creaked with every movement. Elisa's fingers brushed over the edge of the bed's wooden frame, its cold surface a reminder of her solitude. She felt the sting of loss in the pit of her stomach. Just a few months, she told herself. It won't be so bad. I'll get used to it. But deep down, Eliza wasn't sure she would ever get used to the silence that now defined her life. As Eliza wandered through the halls of the mansion the following days, she couldn't help but feel as though the very walls whispered secrets. The house was vast, endless in its winding corridors, with countless rooms locked behind heavy wooden doors, their names lost in the shadows. Elisa had seen only a few parts of the mansion, the parts where she was allowed to go. But there was one part that beckoned her curiosity more than any other. The garden. It was not a secret in the usual sense, after all. It was only a garden, but it was a forbidden one. The mansion staff never spoke of it directly, and whenever Eliza tried to ask about it, she was met with cold silence or a hurried change of topic. She was told in vague words that the garden had been abandoned, locked away, a memory of a time long gone. But Eliza couldn't let it go. The garden, hidden behind the walls of the mansion, felt like the key to something deeper, something alive. One day, while wandering near the back of the house, Eliza spotted the overgrown gate. It was barely visible, hidden behind thick ivy and tangled vines. A faint breeze stirred the branches, but the air around the gate felt heavier than anywhere else, thick with the scent of earth, damp and rich, and the faintest flower fragrance that carried through the wind. There was something inviting about it, as though the gate was calling her. Eliza stepped closer, her breath shallow with excitement, her heart quickening as she reached for the rusted metal. Her fingers brushed the cold, smooth surface, and the gate gave a faint groan. She tried pushing against it, but it was locked firmly. The latch refused to budge. Frustration bubbled up inside her, but instead of walking away, Eliza stood still for a moment. Her mind raced. Why had the garden been abandoned? Who had locked it away, and why had no one spoken of it? Elisa felt a strange connection to it, something deep within that told her that if she could just open the gate, she would find the answers she had been searching for. Without thinking, Elisa returned to her room that evening, determined to find a way inside. She had to know what lay behind that gate. There was something inside her, a quiet voice, perhaps even a memory, that told her she wasn't alone in this. The garden was part of her story. The next morning, after the mansion had quieted and the staff had gone about their duties, Eliza decided to search for the key. She had seen the housekeeper's keys jangling on a hook in the kitchen, and something in her gut told her that the key to the garden would be among them. Elisa hesitated for only a moment before quietly sneaking into the kitchen, feeling the familiar thrum of excitement in her chest as she reached for the keys. Her fingers brushed against the cold metal, and after a moment of searching, she found the right one, slightly smaller than the others, worn but familiar. The key to the garden. Her heart raced, and she could almost hear the garden calling to her. She felt as though the key was not just a tool to unlock a door, but a key to something greater, something that would open more than just a physical space, but her own understanding of who she was and what she was meant to do. The key, cold and heavy in her hand, seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Elisa could feel the weight of it, not just in her palm, but in her chest. It was a symbol of the change she had longed for, an answer to a question she hadn't even fully asked. The lock, she knew, wasn't just a barrier to the garden, it was a metaphor for everything she had kept locked away inside herself. And now, as she stood with the key in hand, it felt as though all her emotions, her anger, her loneliness, her grief had somehow condensed into this one small piece of metal. The mansion, though vast and filled with hidden rooms, had always felt small to Eliza. The silence had been crushing, and her place in the world felt tenuous. But now, as she crept through the dark corridors of the house, key in hand, she began to feel a strange sense of power. For the first time since her arrival, the mansion felt like something she could control, something she could shape with her own will. With each step, the castle grew quieter, the sounds of the house fading behind her. The soft rustle of the wind outside seemed to whisper secrets to her, as if encouraging her on this journey. Elisa didn't look back, her focus fixed on the distant garden gate. She was determined, her pulse quickening with anticipation, but there was something else, something deeper. Fear mingled with the excitement. She knew what unlocking the gate would mean. It would open the door not just to a garden, but to something inside her that she had been avoiding for far too long. When Eliza reached the gate, she paused. For a moment, she simply stood there, the key still in her hand, wondering what she was about to uncover. The gate, tall and imposing, had been a symbol of her inaccessibility just as she had been inaccessible to herself. Now, she held the key to unlock not just the gate, but her own heart. Her breath caught in her chest, and with a sense of finality, she turned the key. The lock clicked, a sound so final that it resonated through Alyssa's entire body. The garden, hidden for so long, opened to her, its secret revealed at last. A wave of fragrance met her, a mixture of damp earth, the fresh scent of growing things, and the soft aroma of flowers that hinted at life and renewal. Elisa stepped into the garden slowly, cautiously, as though unsure whether the beauty she saw before her was real or a mere reflection of her own longing. With the key now turned and the garden gate wide open, Eliza stepped inside, her heart racing, with both anticipation and a sense of quiet awe. The garden stretched before her, wild and untamed, but there was a raw beauty to it. Thick vines tangled in the air, and the ground was covered with lush, overgrown weeds. The garden seemed to have been forgotten, left to stand still in time. Yet, beneath the disorder, there was an undeniable pulse of life, a quiet yearning to be tended to be loved, to be revived. Elisa took a deep breath, the fragrance of damp earth and wildflowers filling her lungs, grounding her in this sacred space. She could hear the faint rustling of the leaves in the breeze, the soft hum of insects busy at work. The air was fresh, carrying the scent of life's promised renewal. And though the garden appeared in need of care, Eliza could already sense the power within it. There was potential here, just as there was potential in her heart waiting too. Bloomed out slowly, almost reverently, Eliza walked deeper into the garden, her fingers brushing against the untamed flora, each plant a reminder of what had been lost, of the neglect that had occurred over the years. She knelt beside a bed of tangled vines and began to pull at the weeds. The task seemed simple enough, but Eliza felt something stirring inside her with each small act of care. Her hands, rough with the dirt and grit of the garden, began to feel more alive, more purposeful. As Eliza worked, her mind began to wander back to the past, her life before coming to this mansion. She had been a child filled with anger, resentment, and a deep sense of loss. She had closed herself off from the world, built walls around her heart as if to protect herself from the pain of abandonment. But here, in this garden, she was starting to feel the walls loosen, the barriers she had constructed begin to fall away. There was something healing about the way the earth welcomed her touch. It was as if the garden was responding to her need for connection, reminding her that even in her darkest moments, life could find a way to emerge from the shadows. With each pull of the weeds, Eliza felt the weight of her isolation lifting. The garden didn't judge her for the pain she had. Endured it, simply embraced her efforts. The plants, though wild and disordered, seemed to appreciate her care, their leaves turning toward her like friends reaching out. Elisa knew she was not just transforming the garden. The garden was transforming her. Days passed, and Elisa's work continued. She planted flowers, tended to the trees, and removed the excess that had choked the life out of the space. Slowly, the garden began to take shape, a quiet paradise emerging from what had been a forgotten place. It was a symbol of rebirth, not just for the garden, but for Eliza as well. As the garden flourished, so too did her spirit. With every bloom, every leaf, she felt herself growing stronger, her heart healing. The silence that had once weighed heavily on her was now a place of peace and reflection. Elisa found herself speaking to the flowers and trees, telling them her thoughts, her hopes, her dreams. And somehow she felt that they listened, that the garden understood her as no one else had. One evening, after a long day of work, Eliza sat on the stone bench near the fountain that had once been hidden beneath vines. The soft sounds of the babbling water and the gentle rustling of the leaves created a serene melody, a lullaby for her soul. She leaned back, closing her eyes and letting the cool evening breeze wash over her. The garden was a testament to everything she had gone through: the loneliness, the silence, the sacrifice, and how, in the end, those struggles had made her stronger. As she sat there, Elisa realized something profound. This garden was hers, just as much as it was theirs, the plants, the trees, the flowers. It had become a reflection of her own inner journey, a space where she could find peace and healing. But even more than that, it was a place of connection with herself, with nature, and with the world she had so long rejected. Healing had never come in grand gestures. It had come in small, simple acts of love and care. As the weeks passed, Elisa's connection to the garden deepened, and with each passing day, the transformation was palpable. What had once been a neglected, overgrown space was now a vibrant tapestry of colors and life. The garden had responded to her care with new growth, lush greenery, delicate petals, and the sweet aroma of flowers in bloom. Elisa felt her heart lift with every step she took among the plants. The once dead soil had been nourished, and now it was alive with the hum of nature's quiet magic. Elisa was no longer the same girl who had walked into the mansion with anger and resentment in her heart. The transformation of the garden mirrored her own journey. As she knelt beside a patch of blooming lily, the sunlight filtering through the branches, Eliza smiled softly. The smile was not one of triumph or achievement, but of deep contentment. There was peace now, not just in the garden, but inside her. Where once there had only been emptiness, every day spent in the garden brought Elisa closer to herself. She no longer needed to fill the silence with angry thoughts or resentful memories. The garden taught her the quiet beauty of just being, of letting things grow at their own pace, of nurturing without expectation. As she spent hours trimming, planting, and caring for the plants, Eliza found herself becoming more patient, more gentle with herself and with the world around her. Asterisk, it was during these quiet moments that Elisa began to reflect on her past. She had never known true love before, at least, not in the sense that she now understood it. She had been loved in the past, of course, but she had always shut herself off from it, holding on to her grief and anger. But the garden had shown her something different. It had shown her that love wasn't about perfection or grand gestures. It was about care, consistency, and the willingness to be patient as something grew piece by piece, day by day. One afternoon, while working under the bright afternoon sun, Eliza noticed a young boy watching her from the other side of the garden. His face was familiar, one of the servants' children who often played near the mansion, though Eliza had never really spoken to him before. He was standing still, his wide eyes trained on her, almost as if he was entranced by the way she moved. Among the plants, curious, Eliza approached him, wiping the sweat from her brow. "Hello," she said softly, offering him a smile. "Would you like to help me?" The boy nodded shyly, stepping forward. His clothes were simple, his face streaked with dirt, but his eyes were bright with an undeniable spark of hope. Eliza showed him how to plant seeds, how to water the new plants gently, and how to care for the soil. As they worked side by side, Eliza noticed something new. There was a shared sense of purpose between them, a silent bond formed through their mutual love of the earth and the quiet work they did together. It was in these small moments of connection that Eliza began to see the true magic of the garden. The garden was no longer just a place for her own healing. It was a place that could heal others too. It could teach them about growth, about patience, and about the importance of giving without expecting anything in return. As the boy worked beside her, Elisa began to feel the stirrings of a new hope within herself. The garden had given her a sense of belonging she had never known before, a place where she could be at peace, where she could express herself without the barriers of anger and bitterness. She had found a space where she could simply be, and it was a gift she now wanted to share with others. Elisa's relationship with the boy grew, and so did her understanding of the garden. It was no longer just a project. It had become a reflection of the life she wanted to lead, one that was full of care, compassion, and connection. She wasn't just growing plants anymore. She was growing herself. And as the garden flourished, so did Elisa. As Eliza continued to tend to the garden, it became clear that her work was no longer confined to the plants. With each passing day, she could feel a deeper connection growing not only with the earth, but also with herself. The act of caring for something, watching it transform and thrive under her gentle hands, had begun to open parts of her heart that she had long locked away. The silence that once consumed her was now filled with the soft whispers of nature, the rustling leaves, the chirping birds, the murmuring breeze. The garden, once a place of sorrow and neglect, was now a reflection of her own inner transformation. One afternoon, as Eliza was carefully pruning a cluster of rose bushes, she heard the sound of light footsteps approaching. She turned to see the young boy from earlier, his face radiant with the excitement of having learned something new. He was carrying a small basket filled with freshly picked herbs, his hands trembling slightly with the weight of his newfound confidence. Elisa smiled warmly at him and gestured for him to come closer. "Would you like to plant these together?" she asked, her voice now filled with warmth, something she had never felt before. The boy nodded eagerly, and together they knelt beside the patch of soil that Eliza had been working on. With each planting, Eliza felt herself grow more connected not only to the boy, but to the world around her. The gentleness with which she handled the young herbs reflected the care she now had for herself and the relationships she was slowly building. She noticed how the boy seemed to open up as they worked side by side, his eyes sparkling with newfound joy. Their shared moments in the garden had become a bond, something that tied them together in ways Eliza could not have foreseen. As they finished planting, Elisa paused for a moment, feeling the warmth of the afternoon sun on her back. It was as if the garden itself was embracing her, and for the first time since her arrival, she felt a sense of belonging, not just in the garden, but in the world. Her heart swelled with the realization that she was no longer the angry, isolated girl who had arrived at the mansion. Through this simple act of giving and nurturing, she had become part of something greater than herself. She stood up and gazed around at the garden. The once wild space was now a thriving, living reflection of her own emotional journey. The flowers, bushes, and trees had flourished under her care, and she could feel the healing energy that now radiated from every corner of the garden. She turned to the boy, whose face now beamed with pride, and she realized that this was not just her transformation, it was theirs as well. In that moment, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for everything that had brought her here. The pain of her past, the sacrifice she had made, and the growth she had experienced were all leading her to a place of peace. And in this garden, she had found not just healing, but also the strength to embrace the future with hope. The boy who had silently observed her transformation now spoke. "I've never seen the garden this beautiful before," he said quietly, his voice filled with wonder. Elisa turned to him and smiled, her heart swelling. "Neither have I," she replied, her voice soft but filled with warmth. The garden was no longer just a place of restoration. It was a symbol of their shared growth, of the love and care that could heal not just the land, but also the heart. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a soft golden light over the garden. Elisa felt a quiet contentment settle over her as she stood beside the boy, her heart now open and full of hope. The garden, once locked away and forgotten, was now a place of life, and so was she. Together, they had nurtured the earth, and in doing so, they had nurtured each other. As the evening light faded and the stars began to twinkle above, Elisa realized that her journey was not just about finding herself, but about finding the beauty in the world around her and in the people she had come to care for. The garden was no longer just a place to hide, it was a space to bloom. As the days grew warmer and the garden continued to thrive, Elisa felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. The work was still demanding, but it no longer felt like a chore. There was a kind of joy in every task, whether it was pruning the bushes or watering the newly planted flowers. The once desolate garden now hummed with life, vibrant, colorful, and alive with the chatter of birds and the gentle rustling of leaves in the breeze. One morning, while Elisa was in the garden planting a new set of perennials, she felt the familiar presence of the young boy by her side. His face, still radiant with the joy of their shared work, had become a comforting sight in her days. There was a quiet understanding between them now, a sense of connection that didn't need words. Elisa noticed that the boy was becoming more confident, his movements more assured, and his smile, though still shy, carried a genuine warmth. "Do you ever wonder if the flowers feel the same as we do?" the boy asked, his voice soft but filled with curiosity. Elisa paused for a moment, looking at the bright sunflowers they had planted a week earlier, their yellow faces tilted toward the sun. She thought about the boy's question and realized that, in her own way, she had begun to feel a kinship with the flowers. She nodded slowly, a soft smile playing on her lips. "I think they do," Elisa said thoughtfully. "I think they feel the warmth of the sun just like we do. And they grow just like we do through patience, through care, and through time." Her words held a deeper meaning than she had intended. She hadn't just been talking about the flowers. She had been talking about herself. She too was growing, in ways she hadn't even realized before. The boy's eyes sparkled with understanding. He bent down to gently touch the petals of the nearest sunflower, his fingertips brushing against the soft texture. "I like to think they know that we're trying to help them," he said, his voice soft and content. "Maybe that's why they keep growing so strong." Elisa watched him, feeling a sense of warmth spread through her chest. This simple moment was more than just a conversation about flowers. It was about connection. Connection with the earth, with the garden, and with the boy who had become so important to her. Her heart swelled with gratitude. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone else to share this with. Someone who saw the world with the same gentle wonder that she now felt. "Yes," Elisa whispered, her heart swelling with an emotion she hadn't expected. "They know, don't they?" She smiled as she looked at the blooming flowers around them, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a deep sense of peace. The boy picked a few wildflowers from a nearby patch and handed them to Elisa, his gesture simple, but filled with the unspoken bond they had formed. "For you," he said, his smile shy but full of warmth. Elisa took the flowers gently, their soft petals brushing against her skin. They were nothing extravagant, just a few wildflowers, but in that moment, they meant everything. As the sun began to set, casting a soft golden glow over the garden, Elisa and the boy sat down on a nearby stone bench. The air was calm, the sound of the evening breeze carrying the distant calls of birds returning to their nests. For the first time since she had arrived at the mansion, Elisa felt a deep sense of belonging, not just in the garden, but in the world. The work she had done here had healed her, and with each day, the garden seemed to become an extension of her heart. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing moment, the garden blossomed. The garden that Eliza had carefully tended to with all the love and care she had given it now stood in full bloom. The air was thick with the sweet, rich scent of flowers in full bloom, and the once silent garden was now alive with the gentle hum of bees and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. Each step Eliza took felt lighter, as though she was walking on air rather than solid ground. There was a newfound lightness in her heart, a release from the heaviness that had once consumed her. With the garden's revival, Eliza felt her own spirit heal as well. She had become a part of the earth, her soul intertwined with the living, growing things around her. It was a quiet transformation, but it was undeniable. The physical labor of caring for the garden had given her something deeper than she could have imagined. It had given her peace. One morning, as Elisa was walking through the garden, she spotted a familiar figure at the far end, her uncle, standing still by the rose bushes. His presence was rare, as he had often kept to himself, hiding away in his study. Elisa had not seen him much since her arrival, and though she didn't feel resentment toward him anymore, she had always sensed that he too was a man locked in his own sorrow. His appearance in the garden was unexpected. Curious, Elisa walked toward him, her steps quiet on the gravel path. The sound of the rustling leaves and the distant calls of birds filled the air, wrapping the scene in a gentle calm. Her heart, once hardened by the isolation she had felt, now beat with an open softness. The once empty mansion was now a part of something greater, connected to the living garden that had restored life to both the land and Elisa's heart. As Eliza approached her uncle, she noticed his pained expression as he gazed out at the garden. He seemed almost lost, as though the beauty before him was both a comfort and a reminder of the years he had spent in sorrow. His gaze met Elisa's, and for a brief moment they simply stood there, silent. The years of separation between them seemed to dissipate in that instant. Finally, her uncle spoke, his voice low, almost uncertain. "This place, Eliza, it's been so long since I felt anything here but grief." He took a slow breath, his hands resting on the stone wall nearby as if seeking something to steady him. "But now I see it." His eyes scanned the garden, and for the first time, Eliza saw something like hope in his expression. Elisa stood quietly, absorbing the weight of his words. She could feel the subtle shift in the air, the change in his energy. Her uncle was beginning to see the garden, and with it, the potential for his own healing. "Uncle," Eliza said gently, her voice soft yet full of warmth, "this garden has always been here, waiting for someone to care for it. And you too have always been here, waiting for something to guide you back to life." Her uncle didn't respond immediately, but Eliza could see the flicker of understanding in his eyes. Slowly he nodded, and for the first time Eliza saw the ghost of a smile on his face. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. They stood together in the garden, and for a long while neither of them spoke. The light in the sky shifted as the sun dipped lower, casting a soft glow over the garden, and Eliza felt that quiet peace fill her heart once again. The work she had done in the garden had not only healed her, but was now reaching out to heal. Those around her, too. The garden had done its work. It had transformed not only the physical space, but the people within it. Elisa's uncle, once distant and trapped in his own sorrow, had begun to see the possibility of restoration. The emotional barriers that had kept him locked away were beginning to fall, just as the garden's overgrown vines had been pruned back, making way for new life to take root. Elisa smiled softly as she walked away, her heart light. She had been the one to bring the garden back to life, but now the garden was doing the same for those around her. Her uncle's healing had begun just as hers had, and she knew that the power of love, patience, and care could transform not only the garden, but the hearts of everyone it touched. The seasons slowly shifted from the warmth of summer to the crisp air of autumn, and with it, the garden flourished further. The once neglected garden, now a sanctuary of growth and life, was alive with color. Vibrant petals danced in the wind, and lush greenery stretched up toward the sun, reaching higher with each day. Elisa spent most of her time in the garden now, her hands working the soil with the same care and tenderness she had once used to heal herself. The garden had become her heart, and every petal, every vine, was an extension of the love and care she had cultivated within. One morning, as she walked the now well-established paths of the garden, Elisa noticed her uncle standing by the old oak tree, staring out at the horizon. He was no longer the distant, sorrowful man who had first appeared at the mansion. His posture was more relaxed, and his expression, though still thoughtful, was marked by a quiet contentment that hadn't been there before Dot as Eliza approached. Her steps light on the gravel path, she saw that his gaze was not just fixed on the view, but on something more personal. His hands were clasped behind his back, his shoulders no longer hunched in pain. It was as if the garden had not only brought life back to the earth, but had also begun to revive the spirit within him. "You've made a real difference here," Eliza said softly, her voice carrying the warmth of their shared journey. She knew that her uncle had been changed by the garden just as she had, and she wanted him to know how much his presence in the garden meant to her. Her uncle turned to her, his eyes filled with a depth of emotion that Eliza had rarely seen before. He looked at her for a long moment, his lips curling slightly as if to say something, but he remained silent. Instead, he placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of acknowledgement and gratitude. "I've always been afraid," he began, his voice low but steady, "afraid to feel the things I've kept buried for so long. But this garden," he paused as though finding the words that had eluded him for years, "it's taught me something." Elisa listened intently, sensing the vulnerability in his words. He had always been a figure of distance in her life, but now, standing beside her in the garden they had both nurtured, Eliza could see how much he had grown. The garden had given him the space to feel, to connect with the world in a way that was no longer defined by grief and sorrow. The garden has shown me that growth isn't just about what you see in front of you. It's about what you cultivate within, her uncle continued. His words resonated deeply with Eliza as they mirrored her own journey. She had come to understand that growth was not something that could be rushed. It was a process, a slow unfolding like the garden itself. You've taught me that, he added softly, his eyes meeting hers. That sometimes it's about letting things grow at their own pace. Eliza smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace wash over her. The once cold, distant man who had been trapped in his own grief was now standing beside her, sharing in the beauty of the garden and the healing they had both undergone. This was not just the restoration of a garden, it was the restoration of a family, of a connection that had long been severed but was now, finally, being repaired. For the first time in a long while, Eliza felt the absence of loneliness. The garden had become a place where she could share her love, where she could give and receive without fear. It was no longer just her sanctuary, it was a space for healing for everyone who entered it. As the afternoon sunlight filtered through the branches of the trees, Eliza and her uncle stood together, silently taking in the beauty around them. The sounds of nature birds calling in the distance, the gentle rustling of leaves, and the soft hum of the earth filled the air. It was a reminder of the quiet power of nature, of growth, and of the deep connection that could be found in moments of stillness. I think we've finally found our way home, Eliza said quietly, her words a reflection of the deep sense of belonging that had settled within her. Her uncle nodded, his expression soft but filled with a new kind of strength. Yes, he replied, we have. The garden had restored more than just plants. It had restored their family, bringing them closer together in a way that was impossible without the slow, nurturing work that had taken place both in the earth and within their hearts. As the light of the day began to fade, the garden, once a place of neglect, had become a testament to life, to the power of healing, to the possibility of new beginnings, and to the love that had always been there, waiting to bloom. The days grew shorter, the evenings cooler, and the leaves on the trees began to change color, shifting from deep green to gold and amber. Elisa and her uncle spent many of these golden afternoons together, working in the garden and taking time to simply be in each other's company. The garden, which had once been a symbol of loss, was now a place of renewal and hope, both for the land and for their family. One morning, Eliza woke early, the sky still tinged with the soft pink hues of dawn. She decided to visit the garden alone, seeking some quiet reflection. As she stepped outside, the cool, crisp air greeted her, and the garden stretched before her peaceful and still, a sanctuary. The birds were still asleep, and the ground beneath her feet was soft and moist from the morning dew. The air smelled of earth, rich and fragrant, like new beginnings. Elisa walked slowly, letting her fingers brush the leaves of the plants as she passed. The flowers and vines she had carefully tended to had all grown beautifully, but it wasn't just the plants that had transformed. The garden had become a place of reflection for Eliza, a space where she could connect not only with nature, but also with herself. It was here, among the trees and flowers, that she had come to understand the meaning of patience, care, and nurturing. She sat down on the stone bench near the old oak tree, the place where she and her uncle had shared their quiet moments together. The tree had grown stronger, its branches now spread wide, offering shade and shelter. It seemed like the perfect place to pause and think. As Elisa sat in the stillness, she felt a gentle breeze, cool and refreshing, brushing her face. She closed her eyes, letting the sensation carry her thoughts away from the daily cares of life and back to what mattered most: the garden, the family, the connection she had found. She thought of the healing she had experienced, how the garden had nurtured her as she had nurtured it. And for the first time, she realized that the healing was not just external, it had come from within. Her heart, once hardened by grief and anger, had softened through the simple act of giving, of caring for something larger than herself. Her uncle joined her in the garden a short time later, walking slowly but steadily, as if the garden had given him the strength to move forward. They exchanged a quiet look, and Eliza felt a warmth spread through her chest. He no longer seemed like the man who had been consumed by sorrow and grief. The transformation in him was just as profound as her own. The once distant figure who had avoided the world had now opened his heart to both the garden and Elisa. Elisa smiled and reached for his hand, a simple gesture, but one that held more meaning than words could express. "We've made it together," she said softly. Her voice held the warmth of the days they had spent tending to the earth, of the growth they had both experienced. Her uncle squeezed her hand gently, the unspoken understanding between them clear. "Yes, we have," he said, his voice quiet but steady. The weight of the past, the distance between them, had melted away, leaving only a bond of love and shared effort. Together, they stood and walked through the garden, side by side. The sun began to rise higher in the sky, casting golden light across the flowers and trees. The world felt brighter, the air sweeter, and the future seemed full of promise. As they reached the heart of the garden, Eliza paused and looked around at the vibrant blooms, the lush greenery, and the peaceful tranquility that surrounded them. This was the garden's true magic, not just in its physical beauty, but in its ability to bring people together, to heal broken hearts, and to show that even the harshest winters could give way to the warmth of spring. Elisa realized then that the garden had become more than just a place. It had become a symbol of life, of the endless possibility for growth, for healing, and for love. And as long as she, her uncle, and the others who worked with her continued to care for it, the garden would continue to thrive. As with their hearts. As the weeks turned into months, the garden continued to thrive under Elisa's tender care. Its transformation mirrored her own, and now, as she looked around at the blossoming plants and lush greenery, it felt like a true reflection of the inner peace she had worked so hard to cultivate. The garden had become a living, breathing entity, just as Eliza had become more attuned to the rhythm of her own heart, beating with a renewed sense of life and purpose. The seasons were changing again, as they always did, but Eliza could feel something new in the air. The garden was no longer a place of solitude for her. It had become a shared space, a place where the family, Elisa, her uncle, the boy, and even the mansion servants could all find a connection. The once distant relationships had deepened, and they had come to share in the joys and healing of the garden. One day, While Eliza worked among the flowers, she felt the soft brush of a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see her uncle standing behind her, a soft smile on his face, a look of gratitude in his eyes. He had changed so much since the day she first arrived, and Eliza could see it in the way he carried himself now, his posture more upright, his face no longer clouded by sorrow, but softened by peace. "I wanted to thank you," her uncle said, his voice calm but full of emotion, "for showing me this garden, for showing me that there is life even after pain. You've given me more than just a garden, Eliza. You've given me a second chance." Elisa smiled, her heart swelling at his words. She had never expected such gratitude from him, yet here he was, acknowledging the transformation that had taken place, not just in the garden, but in their lives. "We've both been given second chances," Eliza replied, her voice filled with warmth. "This garden has shown me that everything can heal. If we nurture it, if we give it the care it deserves, it will always bloom again." Her uncle nodded, his expression softening as he took in the full beauty of the garden around him. Elisa could feel the deep connection between them, and it wasn't just in words, it was in their shared moments of care for the earth, their efforts to rebuild, and the quiet support they offered one another as they stood there in silence. Elisa noticed how much the garden had come to represent more than just growth. It had become a symbol of resilience, a place where every small act of kindness, every piece of nurturing, was reflected in the plants that now flourished. It was a reminder that even the hardest hearts could soften, that even the most wounded souls could heal. That evening, as the sun set over the horizon, Elisa and her uncle sat together on the stone bench by the fountain, watching the garden shimmer in the fading light. The air was still, but the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze was enough to fill the silence. Elisa felt a deep sense of gratitude for this moment, for everything the garden had given them. It had transformed their world, bringing them back to each other and to the earth in a way that no words could express. Her uncle placed his hand gently over hers, a silent gesture of connection and understanding. The garden had done its work, and so had they. "I think we've both found what we were looking for," Eliza said softly, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "In the garden, in each other, and in ourselves." Her uncle nodded, the corners of his mouth curling into a soft smile. "Yes, Eliza, I think we have." The garden had become more than a mere patch of earth to Eliza. It had grown into the very heart of her existence. What had once been barren soil now thrived with color and life. Each flower, each vine was a testimony to the care and patience she had invested, and as she walked through the garden, Elisa could feel her soul entwined with every branch, every petal. The air was thick with the rich scent of earth and flowers, and it seemed as though the garden itself was whispering to her, telling her that it was indeed a place of healing and hope. One crisp morning, as the first light of dawn kissed the horizon, Eliza stood in the garden, lost in her thoughts. It had been months since she had first stepped into this space, feeling lost and broken, and now she could scarcely recognize the girl who had entered the garden for the first time. The garden had healed her, just as it had healed her uncle, and its influence had reached far beyond the mansion grounds. It was as though the energy of the garden had spread into her heart, renewing her faith in life and in herself. Elisa had noticed something new within her, an inner strength, one she had not known before. She no longer saw herself as the girl who had been abandoned and alone, but as someone who had transformed through her own actions. The garden had allowed her to nurture not only the earth but herself, to grow and bloom just as the plants had died. It was during one of these moments of deep reflection that Eliza heard the sound of footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw her uncle, approaching, his gait steady and sure. There was a calm confidence in his steps now, a stark contrast to the man who had once been consumed by sorrow. The transformation in him, much like the garden, had been a gradual process, a rebirth in its truest sense. Elisa smiled at him, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for the journey they had shared. "The garden looks beautiful," her uncle said softly, as he stood beside her. "I never thought I'd see it like this again. I never thought I'd see myself like this." Elisa looked up at him, her heart swelling with both pride and love. She reached out to place her hand gently on his arm, a silent gesture of acknowledgement. "We did it together," she said simply. And in that moment, Eliza knew that they had created more than just a garden. They had created a place of belonging and healing for themselves, and for anyone who chose to walk its path. As they stood side by side, looking out over the garden, the first rays of sunlight began to touch the leaves, making them shimmer with golden light. The soft wind swirled around them, carrying the delicate scent of the flowers through the air. It felt like the world had paused for a moment, as though everything was aligned perfectly. The garden was not just a place, it was a living, breathing legacy of their efforts, their love, and their healing. Elisa nodded, a soft smile on her lips. "Yes," she said, her voice soft but full of conviction. "It's not just about the garden, it's about what we've built together." She looked at her uncle, feeling the bond between them deepen. With each passing day, the garden was not just a physical space, it was a space of love, reconnection, and healing. It had become their shared legacy. As they stood side by side, Eliza turned her attention to the young boy, now older and more confident. He had become a regular part of their daily life in the garden. Elisa had taught him not only the basics of planting and nurturing the earth, but also the deeper lessons of patience, care, and the beauty of growth. The boy had blossomed under her guidance, and Eliza had seen the same strength she had found in herself begin to grow within him. The boy approached them now, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, his smile warm and full of pride. He handed the flowers to Elisa with a simple, silent gesture, and her heart swelled as she accepted them, feeling the love and gratitude behind the small offering. "For you," he said, his voice gentle. Elisa smiled and kneeled down to meet him at eye level. "Thank you," she said softly. "These flowers are beautiful, just like you." The boy beamed with pride, and Eliza felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had given so much of herself to the garden, and in return, She had received not only healing, but the opportunity to give to others. The garden had restored her soul, and it had allowed her to restore the souls of those around her as well. 3 of them stood there in silence, surrounded by the beauty they had cultivated together. The garden was no longer just a space to work. It was a living, breathing reminder of everything they had learned, everything they had grown into. Elisa understood now that this was her true legacy, not just the flowers and trees, but the relationships she had nurtured and the love that had blossomed in the process. The sun had begun to dip low in the sky, casting a soft, glowing light over the garden. It was a moment of quiet reflection, a moment where time seemed to stand still. Elisa looked around at the garden once more, her heart full. The work was not done, but the journey had reached a place of peace, a place where the earth had healed, and in turn had helped to heal her. The garden has always been waiting for us, Eliza said softly to her uncle and the boy, her voice full of emotion. And now it's a place of life, a place of love, and a place where we can always find peace. Her uncle and the boy nodded in agreement, their faces filled with the same sense of gratitude and hope that Eliza felt. The garden had given them all a new sense of purpose and belonging, and as they walked together through the flourishing paths, Eliza knew that they had created something truly lasting. The garden had transformed their lives, and in turn, they had transformed it into a place where new beginnings could always emerge as the evening sun dipped beneath the horizon. Elisa, her uncle, and the boy walked back toward the mansion, their hearts light and their spirits lifted. They knew that no matter where life took them, the garden would always be there, a testament to the love, growth, and connection that had been cultivated within its walls.